All right, welcome back to Coffee and Power and the Modern World. In our last episode, we talked about why sustained sobriety became possible in Europe in the 1600s. And this episode, we're going to talk about what happens when sober conversation moved into public places and why the power structure started to pay attention. So we're going to go to 1650 and we're going to talk about the very first coffee house that opened in Oxford, England. It's referred to as David's Coffee House often. And 2 years later, in 1652, in London, the first coffee house was opened. Now, these were not taverns and they were not private homes. These were public rooms where people could sit sober, talk for hours, and then come back the next day and continue the conversation because that combination was new. We're no longer drunk from morning to night because coffee is now going to shape public life more so than alcohol. And conversations ended and memories were blurred when all we had was alcohol for shaping public life. That actually didn't happen with coffee. It allowed people to stay alert long enough for ideas to compound. It wasn't just about better arguments, it was about longer, more sustained arguments. And as things unfolded, people could have really great conversations about maybe why things were happening. And, the timing really matters here because the political context of the mid 1600s in England, it was kind of unstable, right? So we have the monarchy, we have the interregnum period, the jiggery pokery of the interregnum. And the authority was kind of fragmented, and legitimacy of the crown and the power structures, those were being contested. So, in moments like that in history, unsupervised conversations become pretty visible very quickly. And the power didn't react to coffee because of the coffee drink. It reacted because public coffee houses created something that they couldn't really monitor. The public was sober. They were having unsupervised conversations. We don't know what was being said, and it was being said over weeks and months, not just resetting the next day after you've slept it off. And so it changed the balance of the conversation and of the power. So between 1660, 1670, coffee houses exploded everywhere in London. And authorities started to take notice, not because the coffee houses were immoral or because they were dangerous spaces, but because they allowed for some coordination without power permission, right? So in 1675, actually, King Charles II, who came back after the jiggery pokery of the interregnum, he wants to outlaw and ban coffee houses because he's describing them as places of sedition. We can have seditious conversations at coffee houses, but that fails. It fails because coffee houses weren't an ideology, they became a habit. And once a habit starts to scale, especially supported by the trade and supported by people's desire to continue these long, sober conversations, power can kind of slow that down a little bit, maybe by trying to ban it, but it can't erase it completely. So coffee houses persist and these conversations continued, but the mismatch between the power structure and these conversations was now visible. So by the end of the 1600s, coffee houses aren't just places to talk. The 1688 Lloyd's Coffee House opened in London, and that's where merchants and ship owners and insurers gathered to share information about things like commodity risk. And so coffee was now also shaping commerce. And once that happens, it really just doesn't stay contained. So by the late 1600s, power has sort of noticed there's a problem. They even tried to outlaw it, but they didn't solve it. Coffee wasn't political at that point, but it was definitely embedded. It was embedded in the daily life and habits to the point where the merchants and the insurers and the financial structures were actually starting to form inside these coffee houses. So it's not necessarily just about conversation anymore. It's also about trade. And in the next episode, we'll look at that.